Hi, this is Robert Worm, and now I'm going to do the pre-flight briefing for my flight to Ayacucho that I recently recorded and published on YouTube. I want to start with the airfield data. One source of airfield data is SkyVector, skyvector.com/airports, and there you can type in the ICAO code Sierra Papa Hotel Oscar, and there we have it. The data for Sierra Papa Hotel Oscar, so you can find the coordinates of it, the elevation, type of use, tower frequency, nearby navigation aids, information about the runway, what kind of runway they have, its dimensions, heading, and nearby airports with instrument procedures, because Ayacucho does not have any instrument procedures. So you might have to divert to some airport with instrument procedures. Okay, so these are the data. You see that they have also an NDB here that you want to put in your RUTNAV page on the Airbus. Now, of course, some airfield data are also available in Navigraph. You can open the airport over there, and you will find the basic data about the airport and also about its runways. Not to forget the weather, so you can get a METAR code out of here. And you want to have a very good weather when you fly there, because this is, we'll talk about this later. This is VFR procedure, and it's sensitive to weather. Okay, this is the airfield data. Now, how do you come up with a lateral flight path that brings you safely to Ayacucho? Now you can use the flight tracker Flight Radar 24 to look up the flights of the real airlines here, LATAM flights. So this is Peru here, and I've got picked out one example here. This flight, you can see they are departing Lima here. They have good ADS-B data up to a certain location over here, and then the data is missing, or it's too bad, so you cannot see the actual flight path. So that's a bummer, but sometimes they have good data, and I was lucky when I looked this up the first time. There was good data, so you could actually see how they flew along those valleys over here. That really made sense. So that must have been their real flight path, and they came out here. So let's go to Navigraph. I reassembled this flight path by user-defined waypoints. So this is Liakai here. I have chosen 3 letter codes for its names, Liakai, Akomomba, and so on. I do not always remember the names of the towns here. Okay, so you can see, you will be able to visually see this town here, and then you can fly down this valley, the river. You can identify this town. You can then see this open space here, the river, and this town. So you can make your way down these valleys. Then we have, we have one mountain here that sticks out. It's a good visual reference. And of course, down here, La Vega, Muy. This is your position where you align with the extended center line of the runway to 0. You will be able to see the runway shortly before you are overhead of muy. And well, then you will pass very closely to this mountain here. Might look scary if you are in the cabin and sit on the right side of the plane. Well, while I mentioned this, you want to turn off your GPWS system because it would yell at you all the time. And as you're flying VFR, you must be able to see everything anyway. Okay, so this is the lateral flight path here. Vertical aspects. How low can you go? And when do you have to start your descent? So let's look at the rule of thumb. I'm going to cruise at flight level 310 and 9,000 feet is the airfield elevation. So in between there, 22,000 feet to lose. 22 times 3 is 66. These are the track miles that you need for descent. And again, or additionally, there's some more track miles for bleeding off your airspeed. So I account for 100 knots, which makes 10 nautical miles. Actually, we will bleed off a bit more than 100 knots, but then we will put out the gear and the flaps, and this helps a lot. So if you take these two numbers, you end up around about 80 miles, 80 nautical miles in a conservative point of view. You will have some wind component, and you might round this up to 100 nautical miles if you want to be safe. Of course, you want to be lower than your calculated profile to, well, as low as possible, but not too low because of the mountains. So you need to take a closer look at the terrain and how low you can actually go. Well, okay. First, I want to look at something else. So what do we have here? Okay. This table here is basically the flight plan page. You can, we have the track miles to the specific waypoint. We have the altitude above airfield and the altitude mean sea level. So you can read this from the bottom. This is the final fix for runway 20. And this, of course, is at 0 feet above airfield at 9,000 feet MSL. So from Mui to the final fix, it's 2 miles, which gives us 600 feet AAL. Okay, now to Mui from La Vega, it's 5 miles. This is 7 miles, and so overhead of La Vega, we want to be 2,100 feet AAL above airfield. And so you can make your altitudes up to Liakai. So if you add the 9,000 feet airfield altitude, you're gonna end up with 23,100 overhead of Liakai. So we want to bleed off speed, 10 nautical miles approximately. 10 nautical miles translate into 3,000 feet of altitude. So I subtracted 3,000 feet, so I corrected this for 20,000 feet. By experience, I can say that if you approach Mike at 16,000 feet and you're down to green dot speed, you can still land, but you better be a little bit lower than this. with green dot speed, so I correct this for 15,000. And with a lower speed, you can make sharper turns, tighter turns, which is necessary here. So, and after Mike, I'm going to configure the plane with flaps and gear. Okay, so let's have a closer look at the terrain here. So you can see these contour lines. They are really small. The numbers here are really small. Around Liakai, you have here contour line 13,000 feet. And on the other side, 13,000 feet, you don't see the 14,000 feet contour line. So you can tell that the terrain is going to be lower than 14,000 feet, or not higher than 14,000 feet for sure. Well, and with our calculated 20,000 feet, we are definitely safe here. And so you can do with all the other waypoints here. For example, if we look at Mike, we have planned 15,000 feet. We can see that, well, here we have 13,000 as a contour line. But this is already quite far away. Here we have 12,000. So with 15,000 feet, we are safe here. We don't get closer to the terrain than 1,000 feet. So we have at least 1,000 feet between us, especially as we do not fly overhead of these tops. We will fly in the midst of the valley, of course. So this profile that I have calculated is actually possible to maintain if you have good visual conditions. Then it's totally possible. Okay, what next? Now, very important here, as in every flight, but specifically on this flight, is the missed approach procedure. When you practice this approach in the beginning, you will have to go around quite often because this is a difficult flight. I mean, I have countless go-arounds on my logbook here. Now, I find this one rather difficult because it's a VFR procedure, but it's possible. So, of course, climb straight ahead. Initially, once you're stable on the climb out, I turn to the left by 40 degrees approximately because the mountains are very close and they are very high in front of the runway here. But when you turn left, you avoid those mountains. So this is first is climb straight ahead, and then as soon as possible perform a terrain avoidance maneuver during your climb out. The highest value for the thrust reduction and acceleration altitude that I could enter in the TOLIS go-around page was 14,000 feet. And this is what I actually use. And this is something that works, that is fine to do so, at least with the weights that I had in the plane. So you climb to 14,000, you clean up the plane, and then you can pass over these mountains here. And hey, what do you know? How do you know that you're still on the right track? Well, you can use this lake here. This lake is visible if you look out of the window. Okay, so it's clearly visible if you have the the sufficient weather conditions. You turn around back to, well, this is north oriented, so this will be northwest. You turn around, you maintain visual contact with this lake. If you fly in the mountains and you fly quite low, at some point you are in danger of losing your GPS data and your nav accuracy. So this could potentially happen here. But if you are high above the mountains, then your GPS should be fine. So the waypoint of Paluk is a fix that you can use together with the nav mode to overfly and maybe to hold, and then to track back to Liakai. And this is also possible by visual cues alone. If you're familiar with this area, and even the default scenery of X-Plane is quite good for this purpose, so it's possible to do that. So the target altitude for the missed approach is 22,000 feet. So I choose 22,000 feet because the minimum off-road altitude that applies to IFR flights is 21,700 feet here. And at 22,000 feet, you're definitely safe. Even if you encounter IMC conditions, you are safe. So this is my target altitude. So let's talk about threats. While talking about threats, it's of course the mountains and the weather. So the problem here can be that even if you have VFR conditions, formally, your flight path is going to be confined more and more the closer you get to the airport. And if you encounter clouds, a cloud avoidance maneuver will then likely cause a discontinued approach and a missed approach because you're not able to fly around the cloud and continue the approach. So this is something you don't want to go flying into a cloud. That would be very dangerous. Okay, and I did encounter icing conditions here. So it may be quite cold over there at the airport, and it may rain, and then you might encounter a wet runway and also icing conditions, a contaminated runway with ice, at least in the custom weather that I set up. So take care of your icing. You don't want to lose engines when you fly there in the mountains. Not to forget is the feature of Navigraph that you can look up and visualize the weather, for example, the cloud cover at different altitudes by selecting weather, by clicking on the lower right to extend this feature here. In the layers, you can select cloud cover, and you can scroll through the altitudes, and you can see it. So flight level 160, there's some cloud cover here. Flight level 180, you have cloud covers here. So this is what you can know in advance before you go there. All right. So we want to jump into the simulator and look at what you can do in the simulator to prepare the flight. Very useful for your flight preparation in the simulator is the free camera or the drone camera. Here we are an X-plane, and if you, by default, it's the button C on your keyboard, which puts you into the free camera mode. We're now in Ayacucho, and we can now use the free camera to fly around here and see how it looks like from the air and how your approach would look when you're in the air. So this is actually a bit slow, but let me just fly down the runway center line. Now you can actually see that by the shape of the terrain that your radio altimeter readings, that they will be all over the place most of the time. You will not have a countdown that you are used to in other scenarios until you are above the runway, when you will have a normal countdown of the radio altitudes. So we're almost overhead of the town there, Muy, how I call it, and so here we can see how this would look on the approach. You can see the poppy lights. So here we have 4 white lights here, and we're now would be too high. And in front of us, you can see this part of a mountain. We actually have to fly pretty close over this mountain here, a few hundred feet above it. Now we are on the correct glide path by the poppies. We have 2 white and 2 red lights. This is how it looks like if you are approaching runway 20 in Ayacucho. So now you can play around a bit with the camera and you can see, hey, maybe I want to overshoot. I'm coming from, where are we coming from? So we're coming from this direction, from this valley. So we may want to overshoot a bit to the left to avoid this mountain over here and then get back on it. Then we can fly a bit lower, or maybe we want to fly a bit too high for avoidance of this mountain and be straight on the runway center line. So this is what you can think about if you make use of the free camera in the simulator. So that was the pre-flight briefing. The performance data for the landing is going to be discussed in the actual flight during taxi out. So I hope you found this useful and enjoy the flight.